Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is probably the most famous chapter in all of the book of 1 Samuel, the story of David and Goliath. I hope you took some time to read this because it seems like every time I read this story, I see something new. I pick up something that I haven't noticed before. And I think that's because a lot of times we rely on the stories that we've learned in Sunday school and Vacation Bible School. But when we read the scripture, we see just something different that God is giving us on this story. So let's kind of dig in the highlights, right? Notice this happens in the valley of Elah. You can still go there today. It's a very green valley. And there's just two kind of hills or mountains on both sides. Israel was on one, the Philistines were on the other. So instead of having a war of nations, Goliath comes out and says, hey, I'm the winner, I'm the champion, I'm the one of the Philistines. Pick me out one and we'll battle. No sense of just all these people dying, right? Well, let's keep it to one. So if Goliath wins, the Israelites will go into slavery to the Philistines. But if the Israelite wins, then the Philistines will bow down to the Israelites. They'll go into slavery. We see here that Goliath is from Gath. Gath is one of the five Philistine cities, and we'll hear more about that as we read. And notice it says he was 6 cubits in a span. If you were to put that in our English measurements, that means he would have been 8 foot 5 inches to 9 foot 2 inches. So normally I'd say around 9 foot. Which is a pretty big guy, right? Not just tall and lanky, but he was a warrior. He would have been built, would have been muscular. And so he comes down, and just the size of him, we see in verse 11, it talks about it dismayed and greatly feared the Philistines, right? So just the size and the idea of going against this man scared Israel. Now what's interesting is Goliath is not the only giant here. He's not the only big guy. Philistines were big overall. And so it's not like he was one and the rest were normal sized. All of them were. But it's just the idea of going to war against this against the Philistines greatly put Israel in fear. And so here we get David, right? David's father comes to him and says, hey, I want you to go to the front lines. I'm concerned for my 7 other sons, right? I want you to take them some food. I want you to kind of find out what's going on and bring me back something to guarantee me that my sons are still living. And so we see what's going on here. Notice in verse 14, it said David was the youngest, the 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul. As we read yesterday that David worked for Saul, but here we see that it's kind of as needed, right? So as he had these night terrors, these bad dreams, David would be summoned. He would come, he would play, he would sing maybe for a day, a week or so. And then after he got feeling better, David would go back to his normal job, which was a shepherd. And so David goes to the front line. He hears the story that Goliath comes down, and we see that he does this for 40 days. Every day he comes out and he calls Israel out. And so we see these types of things, what's going on, what are they going to do? And we see that David says, well, why doesn't somebody go out and fight him, right? He says, well, we need to do this. And we see in verse 28 that his eldest brother gets angry that David was there, that David would ask these questions. And that's just a pride issue, right? That's just a prideful thing. And in verse 32, it says, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart be fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight. Saul did not believe in David, but David said, I will go and fight. Remember, David is small. He's young. And he said, hey, if nobody will, I will do this, right? And Saul says, you're young, you're a youth. And notice the story that David says. He says that, man, I fought against lions and I fought against bears, but I love this. Verse 35, it says, if he rose against me, if the bear or the lion rose against me before I killed them, notice what he says. He says, I caught him by the beard and struck him and killed him. David said, I've fought bears and lions and I've gone after them to protect the sheep. But even if they came after me, he said, I would grab them by their beard. Could you imagine going to a lion and grabbing his mane and ripping him down and killing him, or a bear trying to attack? You're that close to his mouth. It just truly shows you the heart and the courage that David had, right? And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion or the mouth of the bear will deliver me from the Philistines. Notice that David doesn't talk about how great and powerful he is. He talks about how great and powerful the Lord is. The Lord has led him in safety from the lions and the bears, so he believes that the Lord will do so with the Philistine. So Saul finally said, fine, that's okay, you can do it. And he gives him all the armor. David says, hey, this doesn't fit, right? Remember, David is little, he's young, this doesn't fit. So he put them off. He picks up some 5 smooth stones from the brook with his sling in his hand. Now, I've heard stories that says, why did he pick up 5 stones? Because Goliath had 4 brothers, which is true, but that's not what the Bible says. That's just some preacher talk, okay? And I would imagine he picks up 5 because what if one misses, right? What's going on? What's going to happen? You have no idea. You don't want to take one bullet to a fight, right? And the Philistine moved forward. Notice what happens. The Philistine moved forward, verse 41, and came near David with a shield bearer in front of him. It's not just Goliath coming forward to battle, but he's bringing his armor bearer with him. So now it's 2, verse 1, 2 against David. And so they go, and notice what Goliath says. Goliath says to David, he says, am I a dog that you've come to me with sticks? Now, we've talked about this word before back in Deuteronomy, and you've probably forgotten it, and that's okay. But the word dog in the Hebrew is simply the word kaleb. And this means not a dog. It means a sexual position. It means a homosexual. So Goliath is saying, you're kind of pressing against my masculinity by sending me David, right? Here I am, big, strong, 9-foot warrior, leader of the Philistines, and you send me this little kid, this little teenager? What are you saying? I'm nothing. I'm not a real man. That's what that saying means, right? So his masculinity is being pressed in his mind. And that's why we get the description of what happens, right? He comes to me with a sword and a javelin and a spear, and he does all of these things, right? This is what Goliath has. But he says, but you come to me in the name of the Lord. David was not important in this story. God is important in this story. David knew this. Samuel knew this as he's writing these words, right? And so that's what the author is picking up. This, the day of the Lord, will deliver you into my hand. Notice once again the heart and courage of David. He tells this giant, today you will die because the Lord will always win. And we see, verse 47, that all of this happens because why? David says that all of the assembly might know that the Lord saves. God is going to do a miracle, not just for the sake of a miracle, not just to save David, but to bring salvation to Israel, that the assembly, that Israel will know that the Lord saves. The Lord is mighty. The Lord goes against the enemies of Israel, right? So David is bringing the good news of salvation by standing up against his enemies. The Philistines rose, and so this happens, right? All this happens. The Philistines rose and came, drew near to meet David, and David ran quickly into battle. So Goliath starts to come forward, and David runs straight towards Goliath and the armor bearer. What does he do? He puts a stone, and notice it says it says it sank into his forehead. So man, it just kind of just pierces the head. Maybe even a little into the skull, but it does not kill him, right? A lot of Sunday school VeggieTale movies, that's what kills him. That is not what kills him. It literally will knock him out, put him on the ground. David ran up, stood over him, took out his sword, Goliath's sword, and kills him with the sword, and then cuts off his head. So this is a gruesome picture, right? This is not the Sunday school picture that the story says, but this is exactly what happens, right? And when the Philistines see this, they get scared. They start to run. Israel pursues them, chases them, plunders their towns and their villages that they just left from. But David took the head of Goliath and he brought it to Jerusalem, and he took the armor. The armor into his tent. So he has the Goliath's sword in his armor, David kept. He took the head into Jerusalem, probably on a pole or a spear, that he would set it in the middle so that all of Israel would rejoice and know that the Lord brings salvation. And so it's a great story, right? It's one that I think almost everybody knows, but what's the point? The point is simply this, that David, right? David is a precursor of Jesus. David is the one that will go to the enemy that cannot be defeated, the enemy that throws, taunts, and fears, and does everything, but David defeats him and brings salvation. Jesus will defeat Satan, the accuser. That's literally what Satan means, right? The devil means in Greek, the liar, the accuser. He will go and he will destroy, Genesis 3, he will crush the head of the serpent. And he will do this not just because Jesus is king, even though he is, not just because Jesus is great, even though he is, but he does this that he may bring salvation. The story of David and Goliath is the story of Jesus and Satan. And I hope you see that. I hope you understand that just as David won, Jesus will ultimately win, and he will bring salvation to all who believe in him. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and I will see you tomorrow in chapter 18. God bless.